My name is Daniel Price. I'm 38 years old. I come from a family that's always measured worth in dollars and designer labels. Growing up, I was the quiet one, the one who fixed things, stayed late to help, showed up early to shovel the snow before guests arrived. My cousins, they were raised to shine at the front of every room. I was always behind the scenes, and I never minded until the day they decided I wasn't even worthy of standing in the room at all. It started with my cousin Madeline's wedding. She was the golden child, graceful, polished, and engaged to a man from a wealthy oil family, the kind of couple my relatives worshipped. The invitations were sent out in sleek gold envelopes, every detail etched in cursive foil. I didn't get one. At first I thought it was an oversight, until my sister called, hesitating before telling me the truth. They said you wouldn't fit the image they're going for. They think you'd be out of place. I didn't respond, not with anger, not with questions. I simply let the silence do the speaking. But inside, something old stirred, a wound I thought I had healed. I had spent years building a life on my terms. I didn't wear designer suits or post vacation photos from yachts, but I had built something solid, something quiet, and what they didn't know was that I had done it with more power than any of them could see. Madeline's wedding was going to be held at a famous estate just outside the city. Elegant, historic, wrapped in vineyards and fountains. Everyone in the family bragged about it, but they didn't know that 5 years ago, in a silent off-market deal, I had bought the land surrounding that estate, including the road that led to the entrance. It was part of a quiet acquisition for a development project I never pursued. Until now, I drove by the venue 2 weeks before the wedding. It looked pristine, draped in early summer light, white tents rising like crowns in the distance. I parked at the gate, watched the planners moving about, and nodded to myself. They didn't want me at the wedding. That was fine. I didn't need a seat. I had the leverage. And I was about to use it, not to ruin anything, but to remind them exactly who they tried to shame. Because the thing about being underestimated for too long is that you learn how to move without being seen until it's too late. I spent the next few days reviewing every inch of paperwork tied to the property. The estate itself was leased long-term by a hospitality company, but the access road, the maintenance trail behind the catering hall, and even the overflow parking lot, all mine, titles signed and recorded. It had been an afterthought when I bought the land, a placeholder for a project I shelved, but now it became a chessboard, and I held every square they didn't even know they were standing on. I didn't tell anyone, not my sister, not my friends. I didn't rant. I didn't post a kitic status or fire off an angry message to Madeline. That's not how quiet power works. I just hired my lawyer to draft a simple notice, legal, courteous, and precise. It stated that access to the private road would be restricted for a 48-hour window for necessary grading and infrastructure review. It was true, and it just so happened to overlap with the weekend of the wedding. The venue's director called me in a panic. She hadn't even realized someone else owned the access road. Her voice was tight, formal, polite, but the fear was palpable. I assured her it wasn't personal. Just unfortunate timing, I said. Yeah, I can't cancel the work, but if the wedding party reaches out, maybe we can find an arrangement. I could hear the weight of her swallow through the phone, and just like that, the walls of their perfect day began to tremble. A few hours later, I got the call I was expecting. Not from Madeline, from her father, my Uncle Ray. The man who used to call me the fixer when his pipes burst or his car battery died. His tone was different now, cautious, almost deferential. Daniel, I heard you're the one managing the land near the venue. Look, I know there's been some miscommunication about the wedding, but I cut him off politely. There wasn't a miscommunication, Ray. I wasn't invited, but I'm glad you called. He stammered, trying to recover. We didn't mean to exclude you, son. You're always welcome. We just thought maybe it wasn't your scene. I stayed silent, let the words collapse in his own ears. After a pause, I said, "If Madeline wants to speak to me directly, I'll consider adjusting the work schedule." That was the move. Not anger, not revenge, just quiet, deliberate leverage. They wanted me invisible. Now they couldn't move without me. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a wedding. This was about every moment I'd been sidelined, pitied, dismissed. And now, without raising my voice, I had shifted the balance. They were standing on ground they didn't even know I owned, and I had no intention of shaking it. I was going to let them feel it, settle beneath their feet. The next day, I received an email, not from Madeline but from her wedding planner. It was polite, desperate, and laced with passive panic. She asked if the construction could be delayed, offered to rent adjacent land, even dangled an additional donation to my company's foundation, assuming I had one. I didn't respond. I wasn't interested in being soothed with gestures. I was waiting for something far more specific, a call from the bride herself. It came that evening. My phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize, but I knew immediately. I answered. There was a long pause before I heard her voice. "Daniel, it's Maddie." That name, Maddie. The same one who used to braid my sister's hair on the porch while I fixed their bikes, who used to laugh at my thrift store shoes and then ask me for tech help when her Wi-Fi glitched. That voice was softer now, controlled. "Can we talk?" I agreed to meet in person, not at the venue, not at some showy cafe, just a quiet bench at the lake park where we used to go as kids. She showed up in designer flats and oversized sunglasses, the kind meant to signal calm control, but she was nervous. I saw it in the way she clutched her purse. "I didn't know they hadn't invited you," she started. "I swear, I just assumed you'd be there." I nodded, slowly. "It's okay," I said. "It's not the first time I've been forgotten." She looked down, shame flickering across her face. I let the silence sit between us, and then I said, "But this time you needed something from me to keep your day running, and here we are." Her eyes welled for a moment. She whispered, "I don't want to beg, Daniel, but this wedding, it's everything to my parents. They'll be humiliated." That was the moment, the subtle shift. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for permission to pretend nothing had happened, to patch over the cracks and keep the illusion intact. But I didn't offer her comfort. I offered her clarity. "You excluded me because you thought I didn't belong. But the truth is, this whole time, you've been standing on something I built. You just didn't bother to look down." She swallowed hard. "What do you want?" she asked. I could tell she expected me to name a number, a donation, a gift. But I didn't want money. I wanted truth, so I said, "I want a seat. At the wedding. Not at the back. Not out of pity. A real one, with a name card. And an acknowledgement, public. Not private." Her lips parted, stunned. I added, "And if it's too hard, that's fine. The road stays closed." She blinked, tears threatening. I stood up. "You have until tomorrow." I wasn't just reclaiming a seat. I was reclaiming every moment I'd been made to feel invisible. The next morning, a courier arrived at my door with an envelope. Inside was a freshly printed invitation, elegant, gold-trimmed, with my name at the top, in bold calligraphy, Mr. Daniel Price. Tucked beside it was a handwritten note from Madeline. "You were right. I was wrong. I hope you'll come, truly. No excuses, no spin. Just the first real moment of honesty I'd seen from that side of the family in years." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply set the card on my desk and got dressed. On the day of the wedding, I arrived early, deliberately early. The venue staff, now fully aware of who I was, treated me with a mix of fear and respect. I didn't demand it. I just carried myself like a man who had nothing to prove anymore. As I walked up the stone path toward the estate, I passed by my uncle, who looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. "Daniel," he muttered. I nodded once. "Ray." The ceremony was as extravagant as you'd expect. White flowers, string quartet, guests in pearl tones and silk ties. But all that shimmer couldn't cover the tension that rolled through the crowd as I took my seat. Front row, aisle side reserved with a place card, and all heads turned, whispers rippled. No one expected me to show up, and certainly not like this. But I didn't look around for their reactions. I kept my eyes forward, calm. During the reception, I stayed at my table while others floated between cocktail stations and photo booths. People approached, distant cousins, family friends. Some offered stiff smiles, some tried to act like nothing had ever happened. A few even asked if I'd come back into the fold. I gave them polite nods, short answers, and no invitation into my world. I wasn't there to be reabsorbed. I was there to remind them that I never needed their approval to have value. Toward the end of the night, Madeline found me. She looked different now, not just tired, humbled. "Thank you for coming," she said. I nodded. "You earned it." She hesitated. "Did you get what you needed?" I looked her in the eyes and said, "I didn't come here to ruin anything. I came so you'd never forget that even when you tried to shut me out, I had already built the ground beneath your feet." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. I walked out before the last toast was raised. No goodbye, no lingering glance, just the quiet footsteps of a man who no longer needed to explain himself. Because the most satisfying revenge isn't loud, it's presence. It's walking into the room they tried to keep you out of, and realizing you no longer care who's impressed. In the weeks after the wedding, the family dynamic shifted, subtly but permanently. No one said it out loud, but they all knew something had changed. I wasn't the poor cousin in their narrative anymore. I had shown up, taken my place without fanfare, and left without clinging. That shook them. People like them I used to power through spectacle, but I had introduced them to something much more unsettling: power in silence. I didn't brag. I didn't post pictures. I didn't tell anyone outside my circle what had happened. But word travels fast when discomfort is involved. A few relatives reached out awkwardly, suddenly interested in my work, my projects. They were trying to understand how I had done it, but I didn't explain. I didn't owe them a blueprint. My success wasn't their business, it was their blind spot. I kept investing quietly. The land I owned around the venue had increased in value after the event, ironically, because of the buzz surrounding it. A few neighboring estates reached out with offers. I declined, not out of pettiness, but out of purpose. I was no longer in the business of selling off pieces of what I had earned, especially not to people who had only just begun to see it. One day, I received an email from Madeline. She had just returned from her honeymoon. She wrote, "I've been thinking a lot about that day, about you, about how wrong we were. I don't expect anything, just wanted to say it again. I see it now. I read it once, then again, and then I deleted it, not out of malice, but because I didn't need it." Her acknowledgement was already written in every step I took across that estate. I started mentoring a few young entrepreneurs through a small foundation I quietly funded. People like me, people overlooked, underestimated, talked over. I taught them how to move in silence, how to own without flaunting, how to build something no one sees coming until it's too late to ignore. Watching them rise reminded me why I had done what I did, not for revenge, but for restoration, of dignity, of balance. And every now and then, I'd return to that same road, leading to the estate, not to block it, not to control it, just to walk it, to remind myself that sometimes you don't win by storming through the gates. You win by becoming the gatekeeper and standing tall enough that no one dares forget again. There's a certain kind of power that doesn't come from money. It comes from knowing exactly who you are when no one's watching. That's what I walked away with after that wedding. I didn't walk away with applause or reconciliation. I walked away with clarity, and once you have that, no title, no seating chart, no gold-plated invitation can replace it. A few months later, I got a call from the venue manager. She said they were expanding, looking to build a new event hall near the orchard section of the land I owned. She offered a price. I turned it down. Then she offered more. Still, I said no. She asked why I wasn't interested. I told her, because some things are worth more to me untouched. That land had become more than property. It was the symbol of the day I stood up without raising my voice. Ray, my uncle, sent a Christmas card that year, the first in over a decade. It was generic, polite, signed warmly, the Whitmores. No handwritten message, just a signature, a formality. I looked at it for a moment, then tossed it into the bin. They still didn't get it. They thought re-entry into their world was my goal. What they didn't understand was that I had long outgrown their world. I didn't need a seat at their table. I had built my own. Elena, a woman I met through one of the entrepreneurship circles, began to grow close to me. She had heard whispers about the wedding story, though I never told it in full. One day, she said something that stopped me in my tracks. "You don't carry it like a grudge, you carry it like a lesson." That's when I knew she saw the real me, not the cousin who got excluded, but the man who never needed inclusion to feel worthy. And, slowly, my life started to feel more like mine again, free of the weight of proving, explaining, or waiting to be invited. The past was no longer something I carried, it was something I had walked through, barefoot and unbothered, because I knew that in the end, some doors are best left closed when you own the land they're built on. I didn't need revenge, I needed peace, and I had it. Elena and I started spending more time together, not rushing into anything, just moving with quiet intention. She was sharp, emotionally intelligent, and uninterested in games. I never had to explain the silence I kept around my family. She understood the kind of strength it takes to walk away without slamming the door. One evening over dinner, she asked me, "Did it feel like revenge?" I shook my head. No, it felt like finally choosing myself. I realized something then. For years I had confused exclusion with failure. Every time I was left out, I thought it meant I wasn't enough. But what that wedding taught me is that sometimes being left out is the greatest blessing of all, because it pushes you to build something no one can take away, something that doesn't vanish when approval does, something that stands quietly and confidently even when the spotlight moves on. I got a call from one of Madeline's bridesmaids a few weeks later. She wanted to meet for coffee, said she had something to clear up. I politely declined, not because I was angry, but because I had no more space for unfinished conversations from people who only remembered me when they needed closure. I wasn't the cleanup crew anymore. I was the architect of my own story. And that story didn't include half-hearted confessions. By the time spring rolled around, the estate had made a formal offer to lease part of my land for overflow parking. It was a lucrative deal, and the terms were clean. But I said no, not to punish them, but to protect myself. That land wasn't for profit anymore. It was personal, a reminder, a marker of the day I rose in silence and left them to sit in their own reflection. Elena once said to me, "Your calm scares people because they expect noise when they're exposed." And she was right. That's why they whispered about me afterward, called me cold, said I had changed. But I hadn't changed. I had simply stopped shrinking. And for people who are used to seeing you small, your true size feels threatening. So, I kept building, not louder, not higher, just deeper. I poured my energy into the mentorship program, taught young men and women how to own without shouting, how to rise without begging. And every time I saw one of them stand tall in a room that once ignored them, I smiled, because that was the legacy I wanted. There was a family reunion that summer, hosted by one of my uncles at his lakeside house. The same names were on the guest list. The same conversations, the same wine glasses, the same superficial laughter. My name was noticeably missing from the invitation. Again. Only this time, it didn't sting, it almost made me laugh. The irony of it all. They still thought exclusion was a weapon, but they didn't understand they had no power over a man who stopped needing their table. Instead, I spent that weekend at a small cabin retreat with Elena. We cooked together, read by the fire, and took long walks without saying much. It felt like the opposite of everything I'd grown up around. No performance, no pressure, just presence, and in that stillness, I made peace with the version of me that used to ache for acknowledgement. I thanked him silently and let him go. Somewhere between the early mornings and the soft evenings, I realized something else. The greatest revenge isn't walking into a room and commanding attention. It's walking past the room entirely, never needing to look back. They can keep their tablecloths and champagne toasts. I had found joy in places they never thought to look. And more importantly, I had found me. Weeks later, a letter arrived from Ray. Handwritten this time. No formality. He said he regretted the way things had unfolded, that he didn't stand up for me when he should have, that he admired what I'd built, even if he never said it out loud. I read it slowly, twice, then tucked it into the same drawer where Madeline's note lived. Not because I needed to hold on to it, but because it belonged to a part of my history that reminded me how far I'd come. One afternoon, I drove back to the estate, not to visit, just to see. A wedding was underway. And from the distance, I could see the guests arriving in polished cars, dressed to impress. But the road they drove in on, still mine. Maintained, quiet, unspoken, and I smiled, because even though they didn't see me, they still passed over my presence every single time. That's what they never understood. I didn't need to be in the picture to shape the frame. I started writing more after that. Not stories of revenge or pain, but lessons, quiet truths. The kind of wisdom you only gain after being invisible long enough to see how people behave when they think you're not watching. I didn't write for recognition. I wrote to remember what it took to become the man who didn't flinch when they turned their backs. Elena encouraged me to publish them. So I did, under a simple blog. No name, no fanfare, just words. And somehow they spread. Messages started coming in. Strangers saying the stories helped them walk away from toxic families, bad marriages, thankless jobs. It humbled me, because I never wanted a platform. I just wanted peace. And now that peace was echoing in the lives of others. Quiet impact, the most powerful kind. One evening, while clearing out an old storage box, I found a picture from my childhood. A family barbecue. I was maybe 12, holding a plate, standing off to the side while the others laughed near the table. Even then, I was on the edge of the frame. Forgotten, I stared at that photo longer than I expected. Not with sadness, but with gratitude. That boy deserved better, and somehow I had become the man who gave it to him. Ray passed away the following year. His funeral was grand, well attended, full of words about legacy and family. I didn't go. Not because I hated him, but because I had already made my peace. Some chapters don't need to be reopened, they simply end. I sent flowers with a note that read, "Rest in truth." It's enough. That was my final word to him. No bitterness, just closure. Madeline reached out again afterward. She asked to meet. Not for a favor, just for understanding, and this time I said yes. We met at the same park bench, where we had spoken all those years ago. Her eyes had changed. Softer, quieter. She didn't try to rewrite what happened. She just said, I know we broke something, and I can't fix it. But I want you to know. I see you now. That was all. And this time I believed her. As she walked away, I felt something release from my chest. Not anger, not pride, just a final thread snapping loose. The story was done, not erased, not forgotten, but complete. I no longer carry the weight of proving anything to anyone. That version of me, the one who waited for invitations, who measured his worth by the approval of people who never truly saw him, he's gone. In his place stands a man rooted in something far more powerful, self-respect born from silence. I learned that true dignity doesn't announce itself. It arrives, waits, and outlasts every loud lie ever told about you. Elena and I eventually married. Quiet ceremony, no fanfare. Just love, laughter, and a few close souls who knew the full journey. She wore a simple dress, and I wore a calm I had earned. No one in the room needed convincing. We belonged to no dynasty, no curated legacy. We belonged to each other, built from truth. That kind of foundation doesn't crumble, it endures. We bought a house outside the city, not far from the estate, but far enough that its shadow never touched us again. I kept the land, still untouched, still mine, not as a reminder of pain, but as a monument of transformation. Some people collect trophies, I collect turning points. That property was the place where I changed, not them, me. And that will always be worth more than any invitation or title ever could be. When people ask what I'd say to anyone going through what I did, I tell them this: don't chase entry, build presence. Don't scream your value, live it. Don't fight for a seat at someone else's table when you were born to design your own. Let them laugh, let them exclude, let them forget you. Then, let them feel the weight of your silence. When it finally arrives and they realize you never needed them at all. And now, when I look in the mirror, I see someone who rose without theatrics, who chose peace over performance, who answered betrayal with restraint. That man isn't loud, but he's unshakable. He doesn't seek revenge. He radiates redemption. Because at the end of it all, the most powerful move I ever made was not proving them wrong. It was proving to myself that I never needed to prove anything at all.